Hi, this is the second part of 3 narrated PowerPoints that review the workshop, a workshop to come up with ideas for different ways to assess student learning at institutional and program level. And we're uploading these in case they're useful to people who are interested in finding out more about how to do this. So again, the philosophy here is that courses and services don't exist in a vacuum. They have learning goals, learning outcomes, and these outcomes form part of a bigger picture because students, again, don't come to campus to do really well in a class. They have some goal to which lots of different classes and lots of different disciplines, as well as efforts from student services, help them reach. So mapping outcomes is one of the ways we can see like what we're helping students towards in our different areas. The institution has institutional learning goals. These include the classic general education learning outcomes. And these are the knowledge, skills, or abilities we want students to take away with them as a result of completing a general ed program as part of their degree, or if they've done a transfer pattern, they should have these skills. So one of them is, say, effective communication. Here's an example of mapping. We've defined it as the ability of students to write, read, speak, and listen in order to communicate. We've given a little bulleted list to give a clearer idea of that. And we have identified at the course level, the discipline level, and service level, we've identified which aspect of our work supports this. Not every course obviously needs to support this. Not every outcome in every course needs to support this. But a lot of us do. So here, for instance, are 4 courses in 4 very different disciplines. And these outcomes cited here are part of what will help a student to communicate effectively. The dental assistant patient who learns to communicate effectively with patients, the art student who interprets her artwork, the chemistry student who can explain chemical reactions, or of course the English student writing the essay. These are all outcomes that support the student's ability to communicate effectively. And it's this ability that we want to try to figure out a way to assess. Here's one example of a kind of routine that is embedded in our flex days. You'll see that on the left-hand side, a little description of the activity. In fall, we hold a collaborative rubric creation session. We take 3 learning outcomes and faculty get into groups with a number of faculty working on one learning outcome. These will be learning outcomes that relate to the courses they teach. They can work together to tailor the language of a rubric to help them assess that skill in their different classes or services, but the rubric will really speak to the institutional outcome. Participating faculty at some point during the semester can, as part of their grading, add this extra scoring for the students and submit the results to the Learning Outcomes Coordinator. And then in spring, there can be a follow-up discussion. So the SLOAC can produce a report showing, what everyone got by way of results, but also the faculty can discuss the experience. Did they have any ideas for follow-up? Did the rubric exercise give them a fresh perspective on what they were doing? Any ideas for collaborations as a faculty discussion? This fits some of the criteria for a good activity. And we went over these in the introduction, the first of the 3 PowerPoints. But bear in mind that you want a decent assessment activity to offer a fresh perspective on student learning. So looking at effective communication in your classes, that can often be interesting if you see it from another perspective. Generates a meaningful discussion. A good assessment activity must contain an opportunity for faculty to sit together and talk about student learning in a constructive and meaningful way. If there's no opportunity for discussion, then it's not a good activity. It should connect back to teaching in some practical way. There should be something that potentially you could do with it. Maybe try a different strategy, try teaming up with a colleague, change an assignment, or maybe nothing, but there should be at least a potential for it. It shouldn't be too onerous. An activity like this is mostly focused on flex activities, and so it's something faculty can simply participate in without having to reinvent the wheel or, spend a lot of time organizing. The one criterion this particular activity doesn't necessarily deliver is that it doesn't really involve students in thinking about this as an assessment activity. But then again, you can't have everything. And maybe there's ways to do this that does involve more of the student perspective. And that would be a great thing to try to make happen if you were to try this. So how are we going to assess students in these institutional outcomes and get this perspective that isn't just in our own individual classrooms? So there's a bunch of methods, and again, each method raises issues and concerns. We can use survey students to see how they rate their proficiency. But here we would want to think about the kinds of questions we might ask, who would take the survey, what we're trying to find out, what we won't learn from it, and what can we do with this information, what discussion or action might arise. Embedded assignments. This would be something which would actually involve a lot of faculty collaboration. It may be something that some faculty are interested in doing. Perhaps an assignment which is basically the same assignment but in two different disciplines, which really draws out that common skill or ability to both disciplines. Or if not a shared assignment, perhaps a blueprint for an assignment. So not actually the same assignment, but in instructions for what that assignment should contain. And again, your concerns are like, are you taking on something that's a ton of work? Are you trying to find out something in particular? What won't you learn? And what can you do with the information? Again, this is just the activity outlined above, but it's something that department or service faculty could do if they felt like it, for their own purposes, maybe with another discipline. Come up with a rubric related to a particular institutional outcome and assess student work in different disciplines. Again, issues are, what's the best way to do this? Is this onerous? What will it tell us? And so on. The best and most interesting kinds of activities that probably do take more organizing, may be something that is best to organize at the college level rather than leave the burden on departmental faculty. But to recruit students to participate in an activity or submit a project or presentation that reflects their overall grasp of institutional outcomes. Now, this might be something that discipline faculty might organize for themselves. An English teacher and a philosophy teacher might get together and ask their students, give up one of their classes to have students host a panel discussion on an issue and use that as also a way to see how well they were effectively communicating. But it's also something that, again, can be organized at the college level, and so faculty would participate in it, or maybe give students extra credit for participating in it. If there were some kind of ongoing college forum or a college activity rather, where students could join in a discussion and get extra credit from their teacher for doing so, then the assessment committee folks could administer a survey to the students who had participated saying, do you think it was worthwhile? Do you feel you used your communication skills effectively? We could survey the participating faculty and ask them, what do you think your students got out of it? But that would be interesting. It would give students an opportunity to see this kind of thing in action. So those are just some of the issues that we use for our introduction. In our workshop, of course, we went on to think of a lot of ideas, and you'll find these in other instructional materials, creative ways to participate in institutional assessment. But for the moment, I will leave you with this reflection. You might think about some of the institutional outcomes your course or service supports. Think about which ones are most important to your discipline or service area. And then think about, if you like, what you would like to know, if you could, about what students are taking away. For instance, an English teacher who's been teaching critical thinking might want to think that a student would walk away with the ability to deal with a deceptive argument. And if she could be a fly on the wall, she would love to know how well her students recognize deceptive rhetoric in their real lives going forward. Or a math instructor might really be curious as to whether or not students used quantitative skills that they had learned and I realized when they could be used to solve problems, or again, to challenge deceptive arguments and to use those skills. So the kind of ideas of like, if I could be a fly on the wall 10 years from now and see my students, what would I like to see them doing with the things I think they've learned in my discipline? So try not to be too abstract, but that's often a good way to start thinking about ways we can collaborate to find out how students are putting it all together. What, in fact, would putting it all together look like? Anyway, some food for thought. If you're interested in the third of these PowerPoints, which is how to assess your program, you'll find a PowerPoint for that too. And thanks for listening.